According to travel blogs, 79% of digital nomads, i.e., people who make their money remotely and live in a different place than their home country, 79% are men, and the US accounts for about 51% of digital nomads worldwide. I'm sure you've already heard about the benefits to being a male digital nomad from the US. Your money goes further in another country, and that makes you very attractive to the women in those other countries, since traditionally women that want to have a family will rely on men who will be taking care of them financially through the family building process. And it's already evident that even the poorest and the least popular men in the US are finding an easier time finding really hot women abroad simply because they're exotic to those women. And their salaries in the US, even if it seems poor to them, it's still more than enough to live a rich life and have a wife and kids in another country that you take care of financially. So that's the benefit of being a male digital nomad. But what about being a female digital nomad? I often hear Western women talking shit about passport bros, which is basically the name given to guys that move offshore to find a mate and make money. And they'll say something to the effect of, wow, these poor undesirables can't find a woman in the US who will put up with their abuse and their lack of desirability. So they're going to go offshore to abuse some traditional uneducated woman who's desperate for food. And I'm here to tell you, as a female digital nomad who spends a lot of time around these so-called traditional women, they're really not that different from you. And their standards are not actually lower than yours. In fact, what I've noticed is that Western women have incredibly low standards when it comes to dating, to the point that Western women will legit stay in relationships where their man contributes absolutely zero financially to the relationship and will even cheat on them, divorce, take half of her hard-earned money and leaves her to take care of the children and raise them broke. No non-Western woman would put up with even a fraction of that, and they would actually be very disgusted by it. I don't care how rich or poor the guy is, the idea that a woman should be feminine and have children and take care of the family finances while the guy gallivants off to clubs every night and is a little boy is not a normal idea outside of the West. It's the product of weak men who are raised to be like little girls. The year is 2023 and women all around the world are getting treated pretty nicely. Men are recognizing women as legit partners and not just breeding machines in many parts of the world. The only difference between the first world and third world countries is that you'll still see this idea of a masculine versus feminine in these other countries. There's still somewhat a sense of responsibility that men have to carry their family financially, no matter how poor they are. And that's what being a man is all about. Because as a woman, if you still want to reproduce and raise a family, there's no way you're going to handle that and be strong and do all of that while worrying about the family finances and protection. In the US, being a man who is mature, kind, good looking, confident, can handle the basic financial needs of a housewife and make her feel loved and taken care of and have kids, that's nearly impossible to find in the US because of how inefficient and overly expensive the lifestyle is. Some men will achieve that ridiculous level of financial competence to be able to have a full-time housewife and children, but those men are going to be far and few in between. They're going to be in their 40s and 50s. They're going to have smoking hot 18-year-olds from wealthy families or exotic countries lining up to date them, and those girls will be okay with it. Out of the tiny minority of men, there might be one or two men who are actually nice people that don't abuse the fact that they have hot young women lining up for them. If you're a smoking hot and confident 18-year-old girl from a wealthy family or an exotic country and you're up for the challenge, then maybe staying in the US to find your mate might get you the kind of man that can and will sustain your needs. But for the average female in the US, and when I say average, I'm not even talking about the average American woman who is pre-diabetic, obese, jaded, toxic, whatever. I'm talking about the average woman who is still somewhat young and fit and fertile and still has some faith in her ability to find love and maybe even start a family, but hasn't found it yet for whatever reason. My warning to you is this: as long as you keep living your life in the US and continuing the same patterns, the chances of finding that dream man might keep shrinking and you'll just keep getting more jaded as time goes on. And you'll get older and less fertile, but that's also beside the point. As a woman, you don't need a man that will give you a Pagani BC. You don't need a man that will make 200K or more a year. You just need a man that will commit to protecting you and taking care of you while you start a life with him. That's all. In a lot of other countries, your current dream life that would have cost $1 million annually back in the US costs no more than 20K a year and is much easier and more efficient. Things are simpler in a lot of other countries. You don't need a car because everything is walkable. You don't have to pay a boatload for daycare or buy all these creature comforts that your friends will be buying in the US. You still can have all the amenities that you'll need, like cheap grocery deliveries and cheap Ubers and great cheap healthcare, and a healthy, cheap education for your kids, plus fun family trips. And yeah, that's all possible for less than 20K a year for a whole family. And plus great Wi-Fi, so you can post all the pictures on Instagram. As a woman, you might choose to not believe me, but the reality is that you can have all these things with a low budget man who is really into you if you were just willing to move to another country. And the cool thing is that in another country, you'll be more exotic than other women. So high value men in those markets will be way more motivated to give you that. They won't care if you're a loser or unpopular in your country or even ugly in your country. They'll enjoy that you're different from all the women that they've been dating. They'll enjoy that you're independent, free spirited, genuine. And compared to the women that they might be used to, you're actually probably not a gold digger. And yeah, you heard that right. The story in the West is that Western women are gold diggers because they expect too much. But I know personally that Western women are far from gold diggers. In fact, a lot of Western women I've seen take on the kind of financial burden that no woman should have to take on because for some reason they've been taught that they don't deserve to be taken care of by a man because being a real man in the US is just so expensive and men are treated like babies. And it's increasingly unrealistic and not even worth it to try to go for that. When people in other countries hear Western women saying, I need a man that makes 200K a year or $1 million a year, what they hear is, oh yeah, Western women are gold diggers. But the reality is that shit's so expensive in the US that in any major city, 200K a year might just cover the man's half of a basic family life in a cheap suburb. And these women's expectations are actually just basic. And usually they also expect to be paying for at least half of it while also having kids and having their hormones. It's crazy to me. And then you have like these Western men, saying, I'm so tired of Western women. They're so ugly. And they think they're queens that deserve 200K a year. And what I have to say to these guys is that they are living in fantasy land. Western women aren't the ones asking for 200K a year. Reality is asking for 200K a year at minimum in the US, and Western women are simply saying whatever they calculated is enough to cover that lifestyle. But they shouldn't have to even be doing those calculations in the first place. That's a man's job. A woman should not be even worrying about your family's financial projections. As a woman in a male-female dynamic, your job is not to be worrying about how much shit costs. His job is to worry about how much shit costs. At least outside of the US, it's like this. And his job is to protect you while you make him the happiest man on the planet. Your job is to worry about your physical and mental health so that you can be fully in your feminine energy, nurture people, do the things that make you and your family happy in life. And if you so wish, maybe even have some babies. There's like a give and take based on who we are biologically. When you move out of your country, away from your family and friends' expectations of how much you or your partner should be making, away from the paradigm of what your country told you is a reasonable amount of money that a man should make in order to take care of you, and spend more time among cultures where men are a little more accustomed to taking care of their women in a healthy masculine way, then you won't even have to ask a man with a 200K or $1 million salary. You don't have to ask for anything in a man. You won't have to ask for numbers. You can just be you in your beautiful feminine self. Remove financial projections from your vocabulary when talking to a man and trust that out there in the world, there are a ton of men, both foreigners and digital nomads from your own country, that have already taken it upon themselves that they will be taking care of their woman in whatever way you need, emotionally, financially, physically, spiritually, you name it, they'll contain you. And the bar is much lower out there for these men to make that happen. Therefore, the ratio of men in your league who can afford that lifestyle that you want is going to be much higher. You can live your dream life with a man of your choosing. And if you and your partner get to the point where you're making enough money to sustain that same dream life back in the exact country of your choosing, then all the better.